Welcome back to another edition of Through the Smoke, a Miami Hurricanes football and recruiting podcast here on the 24/7 Sports Network. David Lake here to do a little preseason mailbag episode here. Asked the community at the Through the Smoke message boards to pop in and provide some questions, topics to discuss here with football, thankfully right around the corner. Media Day for the University of Miami starts on Monday, and then first practice of fall camp is the next day on Tuesday. So football's finally here. Thought it would be a good episode to hand it over to you guys, the fans, and we can discuss whatever you want to discuss and kind of give a little snapshot of where things stand before fall camp. Again, a lot of new information, a lot of performances, a lot of competition will determine how things go for game one of the season. A lot of that is determined during fall camp. But, I thought it'd be fun to kind of share my thoughts and opinions on things going into fall camp, where things stand with the team. All right, before we dive into things, of course, we got to touch on our sponsors, show them some love. Of course, we start with Canes Connection. That is Miami's collective, play a critical role in Miami's talent acquisition efforts. We're going to discuss a big-time recruit that is about to announce his decision here in the coming hours here as we release this podcast on Friday. We'll get more into that, but Canes Connection plays a big role in Miami's success on the recruiting trail, both high school recruiting and portal talent acquisition. So go support those guys as best you can. It's the best grassroots level way to support the program and make an impact. Again, canesconnection.com. Also, our guy Nick Musarino at Musarino Law. If you've been injured in any type of accident, slip and fall, boating, trucking, Uber, Lyft, you name it, you name the accident, Dick Musarino is the guy that you should hit up at 561-960-9870 or visit his website at flinjury.law. And then, of course, if you're in the real estate market, thinking about buying, selling, or investing in South Florida real estate, you should hit up Aaron Pascal with the Keller Williams Group. Grab a free home value report or quick market update. Call or text Aaron at 305-497-5773 or visit apascal.kw.com. Again, all this information on all our sponsors is in the show notes. So go support those guys as best you can. Also want to say, look, with fall camp right around the corner, it's the best time to subscribe to InsideTheU.com. Fall camp's when everything happens, and we'll be definitely providing information on how things are going and progressing during fall camp. So take advantage now. Get an annual sub at 50% off at 24/7 Sports, InsideTheU.com. All right, so as I alluded to, I want to touch on first, Miami is in the mix for a big-time recruit who is set to announce his commitment. This is Amir Sears. Amir Sears is technically a 2028 recruit, but he has decided to reclassify to the 2027 cycle. So similar to Malachi Tony, he's going to play up a year and get to college 1 year early. And he's set to make his college decision on Friday, today, July 31st at CBS Sports College Football YouTube channel. My understanding is that's going to take place at around 5 o'clock. So don't hold me to that. Check InsideTheU.com. Check social media for the latest time on when he's officially going to make his commitment. But Amir Sears is a big-time talent. Even with his reclassified status, he is ranked as a 5-star recruit, according to 24/7 Sports and the Composite. He's a number 11 overall player in the country, according to the Composite. He's now at Columbus High School. He played last year, though, at West Broward and he's a two-way player. So he's a guy that plays wide receiver. He's a guy that plays defensive back. He caught 49 passes for 942 yards and 11 touchdowns on offense. On defense, he totaled 61 tackles, 3 interceptions, had 11 pass breakups as well. I think he could play either one at the college level, either one of those positions. I think he can be a very good receiver. I think he can be an elite corner. But whatever he decides to play long term, he can be an impact player at. If he commits to Miami, he is going to be the 5th 5-star that the Hurricanes have in this class. And I believe the projection shows that they would jump to having the number 2 class in the 2027 cycle, just below Texas A&M. So top 5 class kind of gets solidified with Amir Sears if he decides to commit to the Hurricanes. Also, too, if he decides to commit to the Hurricanes, you could make the argument, because, again, Amir Sears can play both corner and receiver, that the Hurricanes would have the best duo at receiver and corner committed in the country. So, again, at corner, you're looking at potentially Amir Sears and Dante Wright. At wide receiver, you're looking at potentially Nick Lanier and Amir Sears. So, pretty impressive job there, raising the talent level by Mario Cristobal. Again, recruiting never stops, and nobody better understands that the most important thing by far in college football is talent acquisition, stacking talent, and letting the cream rise to the top through competition and holding players accountable during their careers at the college level. All right, so let's get into some of the questions at Through the Smoke from some of our subscribers. So South Florida Green Child asks, Marquise Lightfoot versus Damon Wilson, who has more sacks, and is Hayden Lowe expected to be a rotation player? All right, first question, I'll say Damon Wilson, just because he has a proven track record and weighs 255 pounds. I do like the potential of Lightfoot, and I expect him to have a good season. I expect him to take the next step from last year when he was more of a rotational player. He's going to play a bigger role this year. But I think you got to take the safe bet and go with Damon Wilson, who had just under 10 sacks last year. Marquise Lightfoot, though, is the fastest defensive end on the team. He's done a good job of adding some good weight, some good bulk to his frame. He's now up to about 235. So he's still got some more room for improvement in his career to continue to add weight. But he's going to be a big-time player too. But I think you got to give the edge to Damon Wilson still, as the guy who's going to have the most sacks between those two. As for Hayden Lowe, he is definitely a hot topic here going into fall camp. Again, fall camp starts on Tuesday. And look, here's what I'll share at this point in terms of what I know with the Hayden Lowe situation. I do know that last week he was participating in the player-led practices at Miami. He was doing well at the player-led practices at Miami. I know that there's now some chatter out there that his availability for this season might be in question, or he may decide to not play at Miami this season, etc. And all I can say to that is I frankly don't have much clarity on that situation at this point, but I will point to the past, because Hayden Lowe was also missing for a lot of the spring. And, Miami stuck with it and was able to get him back in the fold here at some point during the summer, and with doing team activities in the summer. And so is this another situation where Miami just has to be a little patient and go through the back and forth of, letting Hayden know that this is going to be the best spot for him this season? I think Miami's going to be going through that. And so frankly, where I'm at, kind of what I've been told is like sit tight and we'll see if he's out there for practice one on Tuesday. So I don't think at this point, as I'm recording, I don't think anything's like set in stone. Um, but it's definitely a situation I think where there's smoke, there's fire. So it's something to monitor here in the early days of fall camp. And look, I think part of this situation is Hayden's a very talented player, and he's a player that would help Miami from a depth perspective because you talk about a rotation and a defensive line coming at you in waves. Hayden Lowe would play a big role in that. He would be, you know, a third or fourth defensive end in the rotation, which means he's getting 30 plus snaps a game and plenty of opportunities to impact the game. And his talent level, he would impact the game. So he's a big, long defensive end that wins with power. I think he would be really effective with setting the edge. And I think as a pass rusher, he wins with his power and his long levers, his length to knock back offensive tackles as a pass rusher. So he's an important player. And if Miami's able to have him on the field this year, that's obviously a good thing. All right, Zach Lab asks, more likely outcome for the 2026 season, win the national championship or miss the college football playoff altogether? To me, there's no question. And again, this is all, this is a comparison. This is, the two options. I think between these two options, the more likely outcome is a national championship. Long way to go. Miami still has to prove a lot, but if that's your options between a national championship, which means you get into the CFP, or miss the CFP altogether, I think this team definitely has more of a chance to win the national championship. JUP Kane 17 asks, David, how do you think this offense looks in terms of style and play calling with Mensa, the running back room, and the receivers in place? To me, this is the most complete set of playmakers across the board, maybe since the early 2000s. Yeah, no doubt. The skill talent is deep. There are a ton of weapons at all these position groups that you just named. And it's exciting to think about the potential of this offense, but I will say the one factor that I think everyone kind of needs to understand and maybe pump the brakes on as you project what this offense can be. I think you got to pump the brakes and just let the offensive line settle into the season and gel a little bit before you can really judge what this offense can be. Because in my opinion, and I think, what Miami kind of feels is, there's going to be some growing pains and some learning moments in the first month of the season that the offensive line is going to have to get through. And, we'll see where things stand in the second half of the season, particularly in the last month of the regular season. I think, you think back to the last two seasons, Miami's had the best pass protecting offensive line in the country the last 2 years. Cam Ward and Carson Beck had all day to throw the last two seasons. And, this group is an unknown in that regard. It's a bunch of new faces. And frankly, it's a bunch of players that I think still have some things to clean up in their pass protection technique. And so I think it's just going to be a process. And look, if I'm projecting maybe what the offense looks like as the season progresses, I think first month of the season, the emphasis is going to be on kind of just like, of course, just winning games and leaning on the run game. Because I do think that Miami feels like the run blocking that they have on the offensive line could be improved. Could be an improved phase year over year compared to last year's offensive line. And so they're comfortable with kind of leaning into that and giving the ball to their stable of backs and controlling games that way. And then as things progress during the year, and hopefully you get more and more comfortable with the pass protection and everything that goes with that. Maybe you see a little bit more of an open approach on offense in terms of throwing the ball around. I don't think Miami's just going to come out against Stanford and throw the ball around a ton like you saw in 2024 with Cam Ward against Florida, where they're throwing for 300 plus yards a game and 3 touchdowns a game. Look, that'd be great. I'm here for that if that's the way it works out. And if that's the way it works out, Miami's going to be ridiculously good this year. I think it's going to be more of a gradual process, and I think Miami could get to that point at some point, in the second half of the season. But it's going to take time gelling and understanding the best personnel, the best five that you can have on offense to run the ball and also, of course, pass protect at a high level. Champ Lennox asks, do you think this team will be as gritty or tough as the team last year? To me, grit was the intangible that made us such a tough out and made us fun to watch. Teams did not want to play against us because they knew it'd be a dogfight. The team really took on the identity of guys like Inez Cooper, Bain, Mesidor, etc. I'm curious if that toughness is still there and who you think it'll come from outside of Mario, of course. Yeah, that's a good point. I feel like I've kind of been hammering this theme all off season, where no doubt that identity of physicality and toughness is something that this 2026 team needs to show and prove that they have in their toolbox. This is just my opinion. I don't think this team will be as gritty or tough as last year. But to me, the question is, can this team get close to that level, though? That's the question. Can this team be competitive? Can this team fight? As you're alluding to, this is kind of a mentality that just needs to be the identity of the program. They're going to scratch, fight, claw in these tough games in which adversity hits, etc. That's what last year's team had. I'm not saying this year's team won't have that, but we just got to see it. You don't know it till you're in those situations. Ruben Bain, Akeem Mesidor, Keontae Scott, Jacoby Thomas, they were some tough dudes. And in my opinion, if we're talking about toughness and grit, yes, of course, every football player needs to have that. But for me, particularly, the defense sets the tone with that identity and that style of play. And when I think about who can be those guys on the team this year, the defense this year, I would look to Armando Blunt. I think he can take that step and be that guy this year. I look to Ahmad Moten, veteran defensive tackle, a lot on the line this year, has the attention of NFL draft scouts. Motore, he has a dog mentality. He was a tough dude last year, and now he's got to be even a bigger leader this year and kind of show that toughness and lead that mentality with this 2026 team. I also think Omar Thornton, the Boston College safety / nickel transfer, he's a guy to me that plays with that physicality that can kind of set the tone for a defense, and it can be infectious with guys like that. So those are some of the guys I would highlight. And then, of course, on the offensive side, I think your toughness is, set the tone with the offensive line. How are those guys gonna do with that? So I think that's a very good question. I don't quite have the answer to that yet. I think it'd be unfair to pretend like I did have the answer to that, but certainly that's something to monitor during the course of this 2026 season. C-Note 305 asks, do you think we learned our lesson on offense versus ACC teams? Do we get the first half of the season play calling offense or the last 4 to 5 games when we had to blow teams out to make our case to get into the college football playoffs? So, this is a layered question. It's complicated. I do think Miami learned last year that style points matter. There's no doubt about that. But I think it's also fair to point out that the number one most important thing, of course, is to play to win the game. And as I kind of said earlier, I think Miami's approach on offense this year, especially in the first month, is going to be, run the damn ball because they feel like their offensive line can be elite as a run blocking unit. And the pass protection still, you got to get comfortable with. You still needs work. So, again, if it happens and the pass pro is great and Miami can sling the ball around and generate 300 plus yards of passing offense early in the season, I think that's a great sign. I don't think that's necessarily going to be the intention in the first month of the season. So if it works out that way, that's a very good sign. To me, I think what you're bringing up is a fair point. I don't know if I necessarily see like a speed bump type of situation where you're facing a Louisville type or an SMU type this year where you play a conservative style game and you're gonna get caught. In this schedule, maybe that's like a Clemson. Everyone I would expect. Of course, Miami's gonna be ready to go for Notre Dame, so Notre Dame's not sneaking up on Miami or anything like that. But I think physically, Miami should be able to impose their will on most of the teams they play this year. And I think that will be the number one point of emphasis. And then as you're kind of alluding to, I think the hope would then be, okay, let's kind of build out the passing attack and get that going to an explosive degree that we know it can be, because ideally you trust your pass protection as the season progresses. So again, maybe I sound like a broken record, but to me, the underlying answer to that question is, what does the pass pro look like? What's the offensive line look like? If it looks good, Miami's going to sling it and they're going to score a ton of points and it's going to be fun to watch. If it still takes some time to settle in and gel, then you're going to see more of a power football approach with the intent to try and build out the passing offense as the season progresses. MJC Miami asks, David Lake, since you have been covering the team so long, I am curious, what is the quality this team has that most closely resembles our last national champion? It's a great question, but I feel like I would be disingenuous if I answered that question because I wasn't around to cover the 2001 team. I will say, like from the outside, the thing that I think connects all national championship teams in a big picture sense, in a 30,000 foot view sense, is your team has to have depth, talent all over the roster. I think Miami checks those boxes. And you have to have a culture that embraces accountability and hard work. I think Miami checks those boxes too. So I think on paper, like this 2026 Miami team looks like it has a chance to go compete for that national championship. Now, the 2001 team, of course, is the greatest college football team of all time. So that's a hard comparison for me to make. Again, I wasn't around in 2001 in terms of like covering the team then. But I think just from an on paper, how did things look standpoint, like I think Miami's roster is national championship level. And we'll find out if the culture's there and what it's like as the season progresses, because that was kind of the secret sauce as, Miami hit that last stretch of the regular season. They said enough of this. Let's show everyone what we can do. And Miami got hot at the right time, and that continued into the playoff, and they made it all the way to the national championship game. Just fell short. So there's a lot of intangibles, and you need everything to come together right to go win a national championship. But does Miami have the roster to go do it? I think they do. T. McCurdy 1 asks, who plays the third most snaps at linebacker? Who plays more between Dylan Day or J.J. Dunnigan? So third most snaps at linebacker, I think I'll say at this point before camp, Bobby Pruitt would kind of be my prediction there. I'm between like Bobby Pruitt or Kamal Bonner. I'll go Pruitt. And then between Dylan Day or J.J. Dunnigan. That's close. I guess I'll say JJ Dunnigan. But that's a good question because I think Dylan Day's right there too. So I think those two will play similar amount of snaps as rotational defensive backs. Dim Boys asks, how comfortable are you with our third and fourth defensive tackle? I'm pretty comfortable. I think Keona Davis is an upgrade year over year from last year's third defensive tackle and David Blay, who was solid in that role, solid third defensive tackle. I think Jarquez Carter is a pretty big upgrade year over year from who was like the fourth true defensive tackle last year in Dante Simpson. He only played like 105 snaps. I think Jarquez Carter is going to play way more than that. Now, Armando Blunt last year was essentially the fourth defensive tackle. He kicked inside quite a bit and played a lot on the inside at defensive tackle. I think this year, I mean, he has the ability to play up and down the line. I think this year he'll get more of an opportunity to show what he can do at defensive end. But yes, and year over year, the four true defensive tackles, I think, are an upgrade from last year's four true defensive tackles. And that's one position where you can't have too much depth. So Miami's in a good spot there at the start of the year. J1711 asks, this team has great depth, but injuries happen when navigating a season. Outside of Mensa, what three players would worry you the most to lose for an extended period of time? It's a good question. So for me, and I don't think there's necessarily a wrong answer to this question. For me, the number one guy would be Motore. I just would worry about who then fills that role. I think the drop off there is maybe the biggest on the team. So I would, for me, the number one answer is Motore. If Miami loses him for a significant amount of time, I start to get worried. I think the other positions can be navigated a little bit, like as we remember last year, right? Keontae Scott missed the final 2 or 3 games, and he, of course, extremely important player. But Miami was able to navigate it a little bit at the end of the season. He came back for the college football playoff and took things to another level. So very important player, but Miami was able to navigate it. I think you could also say like center, because there isn't necessarily a clear answer there as to like who's the second center. But I'll admit, and again, this is just me projecting. I'm not saying like these guys are the backup centers, but like let's say something happens to Ryan Rodriguez. I'm intrigued by like what a Max Buchanan might look like with an opportunity to show what he can do at center. And I'd be intrigued by what S.J. Alafatuli looks like if he were to get an opportunity at center. Now, I think both those guys need to show some consistency with snapping the ball, but I think they could figure it out. And frankly, I think they'd be intriguing athletes at that center position if they can figure out that snapping part. And then the other guy I would probably say is Malachi Toney, just because, I think the drop off from him to the next guy who would fill in with him is kind of significant, only because Malachi Toney is arguably the best football player in the country. And I think he's obviously a hugely important part of this offense. I would expect his role to only expand year over year, and the creative ways that they're going to use him expands year over year. And so losing him, I think, would definitely bring the offense down quite a bit. I think it'd be fine, but I think it would go from elite to good without a Malachi Toney. Canes All Day 1 asks, who do you think we have the most realistic chance at flipping before early signing day? Look, I'm not predicting anything, so don't go like running with this to the bank and saying I'm predicting Miami's flipping these guys. But the two guys I'd keep an eye on that I know, Miami's kind of still chopping wood with, I think, is defensive tackle David Fuller-Runcho, who is a composite 5-star committed to Notre Dame. And I'd also keep an eye on running back Myson Johnson-Cook, who is a top 100 player committed to Auburn. So those are the two names I would say keep an eye on. Not predicting Miami flips them, but those are the two guys that I think Miami will still always be recruiting till the very end. And when that's the case, a flip could be in the cards down the road. It's a Canes thing. 3 asks, Miami has an undefeated regular season, culminating in their first ACC championship, and they are a top 4 playoff seed. Name someone other than the big 3 of Darian Mensah, Malachi Toney, and Mark Fletcher as the key reasons for their success. So for me, this is like an easy answer, and I'm going to go maybe a little bit, off the beaten path with this one, but I would say Alex Mirabal. If this happens, everything you said, Miami's undefeated, win the ACC, top 4 seed, so they get the bye in the college football playoff. It's because Alex Mirabal got the offensive line to perform at a high level once again with a whole new group, new faces. He figured it out, and they're performing at a high level. So that's how I would answer that question. Kevo Kane 305. Darian Mensah. Who are the top 2 transfers on offense and defense this year? I'm going to take the low hanging fruit. I'm going to say Darian Mensah on offense and Damon Wilson on defense. Alvin Mack 4. Where is Luke Nichols' progress? Who are the 3rd and 4th linebackers? Luke, I think, is progressing in a solid manner. He is processing quicker, much better, which, happens over time. That's good to see. And I think he understands the offense, of course, much better year over year and how to get the ball out quick. I think he's a solid backup. In terms of the 3rd or 4th linebackers, I'd say Bobby Pruitt and Kamal Bonner. But again, I think that gets sorted out during fall camp, so we'll see how those performances go. Kane CEO 7 asks, David, you always talk about a championship level roster at each position. Would this be Miami's deepest and best championship roster at each position in the last 25 years? Also, when Xavier Lucas arrived, you were constantly gushing over his first round potential and him being our best corner. You haven't soured on him, but you refer to Damari and OJ as the 2 corners when healthy, 2 best corners when healthy. What have you learned that's made you think that way about Xavier, or do you still feel like he's a potential first rounder? So, first part, championship level roster by position group. I would say, yeah, this is the best collection of talent across a 2 deep that I've covered at Miami, which goes back to 2007. And look, the way I would characterize it, just off the top of my head, in terms of like championship level position groups, quarterback, yes. Running back, yes. Wide receiver, yes. I would then say defensive line, and I would then say secondary are also championship level position groups. I think the offensive line, honestly, is to be determined. I think there's a world where they are championship level. Just don't know yet. We got to see how it plays out. Tight end and linebacker to me are what they are. So I don't know if those necessarily will be championship level, but I think they'll be solid groups still. In terms of your Xavier Lucas question, yeah, I still think he is a guy with first round pick potential, and mainly that's because of his physical traits and his mentality. He's all of 6'2", and I think he is a good athlete at 6'2". The way I would characterize Xavier Lucas's season at Miami last year, I think he was solid. I think he played in a way where he didn't necessarily make mistakes, or you didn't really notice him getting beat a lot, which of course is pretty good play as a cornerback. I think, though, in order to be a first-round pick, he needs to take a step forward and kind of show that he has some playmaking ability. And also, frankly, I think he needs to show that he can be a little bit more sticky in coverage, particularly in man coverage. I feel like at times he would give a little too much cushion, and quarterbacks would take that quick stuff on him, and he'd come up and make the tackle, and it's an 8-yard gain. But at times I feel like Not that he'd get picked on with that, but I think that's an area that he can tighten up a little bit. Um, I think OJ Frederic has first round pick potential because his coverage is very sticky. His issue is durability. He's got to show that he can stay healthy during the course of a season. He has, you know, this summer he has significantly thickened up, and he kind of looks like a totally different player. And so I think the hope is that translates into improved durability. And if it does, he could definitely be a guy that sneaks into the first round. And look, Damari is, frankly, he's like the prettiest corner on the team. His issue, of course, even more so than OJ, is durability. And so Damari needs to show that he can be counted on for a whole season. And if he is that guy, he could be the best corner on the team. And look, we're talking about how, maybe I'm not as high on Xavier as I was a year ago. I don't know if that's necessarily true. I think the main takeaway from this conversation should be is Miami's cornerback group is loaded because there's a lot of teams out there who would kill for Ethan O'Connor. I think he's a solid college corner. I think eventually he's going to get picked in the NFL draft as a day 3 pick probably. And frankly, I think Jabori Antoine's had a really good offseason, and he's going to have something to say in terms of like earning some playing time too. So, we think back to 2 years ago when Miami's corner situation was a disaster. They now arguably, it's like Notre Dame is kind of viewed as having by far the best corner group in the country. I think Miami's is top 5. Like Miami's is very good as well. So it's a very good position group with a lot of future pros. Sam Wright asks, do we average 40 and how many games do we score 50? So if we're talking just regular season, does Miami average 40? Because I think, when you get into the college football playoff, and let's say you play 4 college football playoff games, those games are generally in the 20s, right? So that's going to bring your average down from the regular season. So if we're talking scoring 40 a game in the regular season, I think so. I think Miami will do that. And I would say 4 games over 50. My 3 or 4. I'm somewhere between 3 or 4. I'm a glass half full guy, so I'll say 40. But yeah, I think Miami's going to average 40 points in the regular season. Now, in the playoffs, that number will come down. Probably end up being a high 30s situation. But in the regular season, I think Miami's going to average 40 plus. St. Louis Canes ask, what player on the roster would you say is most likely to win a postseason award? What award would it be? So I would say Malachi Toney, either the Biletnikoff, which is the top receiver in the country, or possibly even like the Paul Hornung Award, which is the most versatile player in the country. So we all know that Malachi can make plays as a receiver, carrying the ball as a runner, special teams, and of course as a quarterback at times, throwing the ball. So I could see him winning either one of those 2 awards. Last year, I think I have this right. I think Ruben Bain was the only one to win a national award, and he was the Ted Hendricks Award for the best defensive end in the country. Allstoned 52 asks, big picture, how has it been for you personally to see the progression of the program over the years to where we are now? I know that it's fun to watch up close. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's wild to see the transformation of the program. I've talked about it at length on various platforms and here too, even. The bottom line is just Miami's now a serious football program, serious football operation from, talent acquisition, player development, coaching. It's all elite level stuff. Miami's in that tier of, the way they're operating right now, they're in that tier of Georgia, Ohio State, Notre Dame, Oregon, all these teams that operate at this elite level. Miami's now in that tier. And I don't think people realize, like, Mario Cristobal doing that in 4 years, 5 years, that's pretty impressive to do it that quickly because it's been a heavy lift. And now look, if I get on my soapbox a little bit, it's important. It's critically important that Miami goes out and hires the right athletic director, the right AD to kind of keep this thing rolling. We're seeing now this week jersey patches from Ohio State going for, reportedly 17 million, Notre Dame's 18 million. You need an AD that knows how to navigate these type of situations and maximize a brand value situation that Miami presents. And so, um, you know, I think it's important to, from an administrative level, president of this university, et cetera, and they're all in on football. So when I say this, they're all in on football, and they know the importance of this. But it's just, in my opinion, like we all hold Mario Cristobal to this extremely high standard as a head coach, where you have to recruit at an elite level, you have to win games at a high level, you got to compete for championships. That is a high, high, high standard. You need to find an AD that's also embracing that standard and also willing to go chase that standard, whether or not it's realistic. Because, yes, of course, like Ohio State is a different level from an alumni situation, if we're being honest, from a brand situation, et cetera. But you can't think like that if you're an administrator. You have to say, okay, Ohio State got 17. We're going to be in that ballpark too, because we're the University of Miami and our brand is strong. And you know what? We beat Ohio State on the field last year. So why can't we get our jersey patch, as an example, close to that number? Um, Anyways, sorry, on my soapbox. And this AD hire is critically important because you do need, like Mario Cristobal is more than doing his part. You need an AD that's only going to empower this thing and put some jet fuel in this thing and take it to another level, because Miami's on the precipice right now of like a run that's like, 5+ years. And that's long in college football. You can project out 5+ years of like high level stuff. Miami's on the verge of that. And so you need an AD that, again, can only supplement this and help it reach that potential. Um, Bird Road Kane asks, any news on the AD search? Oh, just touched on that. I mean, nothing really to bring here to the podcast. I know like CAA is helping them in this search, and they're vetting about 4 candidates from all walks of sports business. So, um, you know, pick the right guy, please. And then Bird Road Kane asks, how are the interior offensive linemen progressing? Do you think there'll be a noticeable drop off in the run game? I'm not saying we'll be bad, but it's hard to replace guys like Inez Cooper, who are 4-year starters. Yeah, I mean, as I kind of alluded to, like I think Miami would tell you that their interior offensive line play, from a run blocking perspective, left a lot of meat on the bone last year. From a pass protection standpoint, they were good. They were fine. But I think they feel like this year's group, a little more physicality, a little more nastiness to them. And so they're going to be better year over year. They feel in the run blocking phase. And, the question mark is, how's the pass pro technique? How's the pass pro holding up this year? So we'll see how that plays out. B Pink 2 asks, what's our regular season record if Luke Nickel had to start week 1? I'd say 9-3 or 8-4, which I don't think is like a slight. Like anytime you got to go to your backup, and if you got to navigate a whole season with your backup and you go 9-3 or 8-4, that kind of speaks to a talented roster, right? So that'd be my guess, 9-3 or 8-4. Kavaski 17 asks 2 questions. If you had to guess, who do you think emerges as the starting left tackle week 1? Jackson Cantwell or Samson Okunlola? Do you see a world where they are both starting on opposite sides and Matthew McCoy is a full-time guard? So week 1, I would guess, again, this is going to be decided in fall camp. So there's going to be twists and turns throughout this process. But before camp, right now, if I were to guess, I'd probably guess Samson Okunlola as the starting left tackle. I could see a world where, Jackson and Samson are your starting 2 offensive tackles. I think Cantwell's going to cross-train at left tackle at guard, at right tackle during camp. Personally, this is my opinion. I see McCoy more having a offensive tackle body type and athletic profile than Okunlola. And again, I've put articles up on InsideTheU.com. I think as I view things right now at the offensive line starting five, yes, I think Okunlola Sampson's going to get the first crack at left tackle. In my opinion, I think as the season progresses, we see Jackson Cantwell start to rotate in at left tackle more and more and more. And I wouldn't be surprised if by, the last month of the season, Jackson Cantwell is your starting left tackle and Samson Okunlola is your starting left guard. That's my personal opinion. We'll see how it plays out. XR Kane asks, do you believe Lightfoot starts opposite of Damon Wilson, or is it Armando? I think it's probably going to be Armando. XR Kane asks, who's our starting X wide receiver in game one against Stanford? That's a good question. I could see any of the guys. So I think, look, you write in pen, Malachi Toney starting in the slot, and Cooper Barkate starting as an outside receiver. So who's that third guy going to be on the outside? I could see any of the candidates kind of winning that job. And again, it's going to be decided in fall camp. But as things stand right now before camp, I'd probably go Dalen Upshaw. But he has to earn it. I think there's a sense that he's dependable. You know what you're going to get. High floor guy with Dalen Upshaw. And I think there's a case to be made either way with that because, look, you're going to get some explosive potential with Malachi Toney, who's the best short route wide receiver in the country. Cooper Barkate, according to the stats last year, was the second best intermediate route wide receiver in the country last year. And so when you have two playmakers like that, maybe you just put like a dependable guy as the third receiver on the field that he's going to execute his job and he'll be productive in his own right. So that's one line of thinking. I think the other line of thinking would be, okay, if we have the best short route, one of the best intermediate routes, why don't we put as the third receiver a guy who can stretch the field and really challenge defenses across the whole field? And so to me, that could be like a Josh Moore with his length at 6'4" and long speed. Needs to take a next step with his consistency, like catching it strong, at the catch point more consistently. Vandrevius Jacobs, very nice deep speed. I think that, the rest of his route tree still needs some refinement. And then there's Cam Vaughn, who, I think he is probably the best contested catch player that Miami has on the outside. And I think Miami would tell you he's one of the more talented receivers on the team. I think the buy-in needs to improve there from Cam Vaughn. And if the buy-in improves, then he'll get his opportunities. And Samorian Wingo is a freshman to keep an eye on. Very talented. Is he going to get that opportunity? Because Miami has so many bodies there, it's going to be tough to earn playing time. But Samorian Wingo is a guy to know, and we'll see how it works out in terms of his opportunities this fall. But if I was picking, I would probably, at this point, say Dalen Upshaw. XR Kane asks, do you foresee any of the freshman defensive tackles working their way into the rotation at any point in the season? If so, who and why? Frankly, not unless there's like injuries that happen, and then you got to elevate some guys. Of the freshmen, I would probably say keep an eye on Logan Nagel. L.I. Canes 26 asks a series of questions, so I'll just provide quick answers. Bigger impact this season, third Scroggins or Hayden Lowe? I mean, look, due to the uncertainty of Lowe, I'd say Scroggins. Rank in order biggest role going through the running backs. He lists Jordan Lyle, he lists Gerard Pringle, he lists Marty Brown. My order would be Marty Brown, Gerard Pringle, Jordan Lyle. More offensive production, Gavin Muller or Izzy Briggs, the freshman tight ends. In my opinion, Muller, just because I think there's a path for Muller to play quite a bit if he earns it as an inline tight end. They are excited about Izzy Briggs and his pass catching ability. But to me, he's like solely a flex tight end. So I wonder how many snaps you can get in that role. Whereas I think Muller can play quite a bit if he earns that ability to go be on the field a bunch as an inline tight end. Who has a bigger role between the transfer receivers, Andrevius Jacobs or Cam Vaughn? I would say Jacobs. Ray Arm Week asks, Dawson made changes to the offense each year based on personnel. Given this year's personnel, what changes do you think we'll see versus last year? Again, I feel like this is a cop-out answer, but I think it's the correct answer. I think a lot of this kind of depends on how the offensive line gels. Until we know how that looks, it's kind of hard to answer that question. Sam Wright asks, what are some areas on the team or players on the team you can see outperforming your expectations? So I'm curious what Kellen Wiley's role looks like this year. Just like in the spring, they were using him in some interesting ways, particularly as a blitzer. And he is very impressive because of his physical gifts in that role. Now, actually playing linebacker, I don't know how that's going to go with Kellen Wiley, but if you tell him you're on the field to go attack the quarterback and go attack the line of scrimmage, I think he can make an impact in that role. Will he get that opportunity? I don't know, but I'm curious. So that'd be a guy I'd bring to the table, within this context of the question. And as I alluded to kind of earlier, I'd also be curious, like, does Samorian Wingo emerge as the season progresses? Rodney P88 asks, two players, one on offense and one on defense, who will be considered breakout players this season. I guess I would go Dalen Upshaw on offense, and I'd probably go Jabari Antoine on defense. Both guys probably played less than 100 snaps last year. They're in their second year in the college level, so I think they're going to have much bigger roles this year. Tags305 asks, 5 players that don't start fall camp in the 2 deep but end up there during the season. That's a very hard question because 2 deep is 2 deep. And so if we're talking like who's a third string player that kind of starts playing a significant role, I mean, it's not what I would predict, but like guys that I would say maybe have a path to fit this description. Again, Samorian Wingo. I mean, this is random and like deep, but like tight end Owen Ruskovich. He's a walk-on tight end basically, but he's 6'7", 260. And I wonder if there's a path for him to be an inline tight end, kind of play that role and get some snaps in that role. I would say maybe this is a cop-out, but like Jordan Lyle, Javian Mallory at running back. I mentioned Kellen Wiley, maybe a Camden Portis. Truthfully, though, all these are kind of long shots. I wouldn't like take any of these to the bank, but those are the guys that I would bring to that discussion. JMOG Byrne asks, who will be the Miami starting 5 offensive line in the national championship game? So personally, this is just what I would do. I would hope that things progress in a way where you see Jackson Cantwell at left tackle, Samson Okunlola left guard, center Ryan Rodriguez, right guard Ben Congdon, and then right tackle Matthew McCoy. Anon 5173279 asks, obviously Notre Dame will be our hardest game. Is there another team on our schedule that we shouldn't underestimate? Yeah, I mean, I think Clemson at Clemson is probably going to be a war. I mean, that's a proud program. They do have some talent. They're not going to go down easy. Maybe I'm way off here. And I understand like they're a complete train wreck right now, but I don't love the idea of like going to Chapel Hill and playing North Carolina the week before Notre Dame. Maybe that's an easy win, but I have some weird feeling about that one. And then Wake Forest on a Friday night in week 3 of the season to me is sleepy, spooky game. So those would probably be the three that I would bring to the discussion on that. SC Kane 34 asks, what percentage chance do you think it is with a heavy quarterback class this year that Mensa comes back? Over, under 40%. I mean, this is hard to answer, right? I mean, the season, of course, will, tell the story here, but going into the season, I'd probably say over 40% chance, in my opinion, that Mensa comes back. Here's why I think that way. With what Mensa gets paid at Miami, it really only makes sense for him to go if he is like a guaranteed first round pick. And I think he will be a highly, highly productive player at Miami this year. I just don't know if he necessarily has the physical traits of a first round quarterback. And again, this isn't like apples to apples comparison. Carson Beck was the third quarterback taken in the NFL draft. Now, he was slotted in the third round, so that definitely plays a role in this. But his contract, he just signed it, was $7.4 million over 4 years. Darian Mensah makes close to that this year alone. And so, of course, if he came back for another year, he would make about that for one more year and still get those valuable developmental reps. And as you're alluding to, like if you look at this potential quarterback class and what it could be, there's a lot of names, right? CJ Carr, Notre Dame's getting a lot of buzz. Arch Manning always gets buzz. Dante Moore supposedly would have been in the mix to be a top 5 pick this year. I think Trinidad Chambliss is intriguing, even though he's undersized from a height standpoint. I think Jaden Mayava could take a leap into being like a first round quarterback because he has those traits. You could also have guys emerge like a CJ Bailey, a Drew Mestemaker, Julian Sayin, Lenora Sellers, Sam Levitt. And look, Darian Mensah from like a college production standpoint is going to be just right on par with these guys. But in addition to that, of course, at the NFL level, you need the physical traits. And so that's where I'm just kind of like, does he need another year of kind of refining those physical traits a little bit? And again, if you can come back to Miami for one more year and make more money than you would as a second round pick or later, then you should do it. So that's my thoughts. And I think, look, of course, just from a selfish Miami point of view, I think that's the best case scenario for the program. You get 2 years of Darian Mensah. You're going to be in the mix every year that he's kind of leading the way for your offense. So we'll get out of here on that note. That was a fun one. I appreciate everyone at the Through the Smoke message board community for dropping those good questions. Football's here, man. Best time of year. Love fall camp. That's when you really start to find out about your team and what it could look like here during the course of the regular season. Best sport in the world, and it's going to be another fun year. So go support us at InsideTheU.com. Again, 50% off annual subscription. Go jump on that. It means the world to us if you can do that. And Gabby and I will be back in the next podcast. And until next time, take care.